Now we're going to go ahead and create tile objects so that we're going to be able to populate our storyboard's information. To do that, we could create all of these inside ccViewController.m, but as is mentioned in the assignment, we're going to create a factory to manage the creation of all of these objects. And what that's going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to keep ccViewController much cleaner, and we're going to be able to fit into that factory paradigm, design paradigm that we mentioned as well in the assignment. So let's go ahead and create a new file, and we're going to go to File, New File, and we're going to go to Cocoa Touch Objective-C class. We're going to press Next, and we're going to type in CC Factory. We're going to be able to press Next, and we can press Create. And I'm going to move this up to the top of my model here. In fact, you could even create another group if you wanted to. So you could go to File, New Group, and we could even create a special group just for our factory, because our factory really isn't a model. Although we can kind of leave it in the model class because it's going to manage all our models and be creating all of our model objects. So let's go ahead, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our header file and we're going to create a method. And this method we're going to say void, and we're going to go ahead and define a method here, and this method is going to return an object to us. So we're going to do NSArray. It's going to return an array of tiles to us. So we can call our method tiles. We can add a semicolon. So what's great about this is all I have to do in ccViewController.m is import my factory, call the method tiles on an instance of a CC factory, and I'm going to get an array of all of our tile objects back. So let's go ahead and implement this so we can properly set up our tile objects so we get columns and rows. Well, let's go into ccViewController.m, excuse me, and we're going to go into the implementation. We can write NSArray, and we can write tiles, which is our method name. I can add curly braces. Also, we could have just copy and pasted from our header file the method name, pasted it in, and gone ahead and remove the semicolon and added our curly braces. Now we have one error here, and it says control reaches end of non-void function. Well, what this is saying to us is we're telling our computer that we're going to return an array. However, we're not returning anything right now. So we know that we have to return an NSArray at the end of this. Well, first let's go ahead and start creating our tile objects. So we can do CC tile. And oh wait, there's an issue here. I forgot to import my tile file. So I can go ahead and I can go to the top here and I can import cctile.h. And now I can go ahead and create a CC tile object. And we'll call this tile1. And we can say CC tile alloc in it. Now, we remember in our header file that we created a whole bunch of properties for CC tile. But we just want to get our navigation working first for our different arrows so that we're going to be able to navigate into different tiles. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to add one placeholder, and that's just going to be our story so that we can confirm that our tiles are working properly. So we're going to write tile1.story is equal to story1. And I can go ahead and I'm going to copy this, and in fact we're going to need 12 tiles, so I'm going to copy this 12 times. And I can go down the list here and I can change tile 1 to tile 2, tile 2 to tile 3, and so on and so forth. And we'll just go all the way down switching these. Feel free to write them out, but as much as we can, we want to try to avoid this. Now, some of you are saying, well, this is really silly. Why don't we just use a for loop? Well, it's nice to see, at least when you're starting out, that each one of these tile objects, that we can create multiple tile objects. And in fact, up to this point, this is the most objects you've seen created in a single spot. And we get to see that we have 12 different instances of CC tile. And here, each one has its own properties. So it's kind of nice to lay everything out, especially when you're starting to learn about object orientation. Sometimes seeing all these different objects having different properties is incredibly helpful. So we're going to go ahead and change all of these story labels as well so that we don't get the same thing over and over again. Finally, let's go through and update all the variable names here. So we're going to do tile1.story, tile2.story, tile3, and so on and so forth. If we left only tile 1, we would consistently be updating the same tile 1 object, and that's why we're not getting thrown an error here. But we want to update each individual tile object, so let's go ahead and go through and update these names to be the proper tile objects. So once that's done, we need to start thinking about how do we group these tile objects so that we can get our indexes set up properly so that we're going to be able to navigate between tiles in a meaningful way. Well, one solution we could use here would be to give every tile some sort of point or some sort of coordinate. But there's an easier way we can create a coordinate system, and that's by simply using an array within an array, or we say an embedded array. And that's, we're going to group 3 tiles together, and that's going to become column 1. We're going to group the next 3 tiles together, and that's going to become column 2, and so on and so forth. Once we have all these groups of columns, we're going to group them all together, and that will become our full coordinate system, so that we'll have 4 columns with 3 rows. So let's see how that will work. Well, first we're going to have to create an NSMutable array. And we can go ahead and call this first column. We can say is equal to NSMutable array, alloc, init. And I can do first column, add object. Well, I need a left bracket, so we can do left bracket, first column, add object. And we can add tile 1. We can do first column, add object, tile 2. And we can say first column, add object, tile 3. Next, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for our next grouping of tiles. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this here, and we'll just update the name. So instead of first column, we can call this second column. And instead of adding from first column add object, I'm just going to do second column. I'm just using Command C and Command V to copy and paste pretty quickly. Instead of tile 1, it'll be tile 4, tile 5, and tile 6. And I can go ahead and do the same thing for our next grouping. So instead of second column, we'll call this third column. And finally, we can go ahead and update fourth column. Well, first I need to update these variable names. So we're going to do third column, third column, third column. And I can say tile 7, tile 8, and tile 9. And finally, let's add our remaining tiles. So let's do fourth column. And we'll say tile 10, tile 11, and tile 12. So there's one final step here, and that's we need to return an array. Well, right now we have 4 column arrays. Well, let's put those all into one so that each array will be its own column, and then each object at each column will be the rows. So we'll have, because we have 3 objects in each column, we'll have 3 rows in our array system once we set that up, or our index system. So let's go ahead and we can create an NS array, and we can say tiles is equal to NS array alloc init, and we're actually going to use a special initializer here. So we could do an NSMutable array, add all of these ones the way we've been doing here, or we could just initialize this object with a bunch of objects. We do initialize with object, and we can say first column, second column, third column, and fourth column. And this is just a little bit of shorthand, which is faster because we can immediately initialize it with this object instead of having to add all these additional lines of code. Now you might be saying, like, why do we bother with all these NSMutable arrays? Well, I was just showing you a good use case for NSMutable array, right? Like, it fit nicely that we were able to add all these objects, and we could see that we were adding, each object separately. But we could also have just created an NS array and initialized it with, say, tile 7, tile 8, and tile 9. And in fact, that would have actually been better from a performance standpoint because NS arrays aren't as heavy as NSMutable arrays are. However, because we're wrapping this in an NS array at the end, it doesn't really matter from a performance standpoint. We can go ahead and leave that like that. But if you wanted to go ahead and do a little bit of refactoring, go ahead and try using NS arrays instead of NSMutable arrays, and then add all of those arrays to our tiles array that we have here at the end. So finally, because our method returns an NS array, we know that we need to type return, and we can return our tiles array. So now we have created a factory method which goes ahead and it creates a bunch of tiles. We call the method tiles on an instance of our factory object.